Door County, isn't it? I feel so sorry for those people in Florida. They have no idea what they are missing. I want to welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Door County. Thank you, Ray. That means speak louder? Okay. Keep that up, because if anybody can't hear...
It's on.
Do you think it's on?
No.
Okay. I'm going to be real close here.
Yep.
But anytime you can't hear me, just raise your hand. I won't call on you. It's a signal.
Part of the problem is this in front of us.
Does that help?
Yes.
I had no idea. Martin was being obstructionist. Well, my name is Joan Shiels. I am a friend of this fellowship. I am a frequent speaker. For those of you who are guests, this is a lay-led fellowship. They do not have a pastor. They do all of the work themselves. It's a very dedicated group of people run by a small board. Garrett, don't go away. I want to introduce Garrett Cohen, who's the president of this fellowship. I would like the board to stand up and be seen so that our visitors can see who this board is that does so much work without a pastor or any paid employee. I would also like every person here who is a member of this fellowship to stand so our visitors can see who you are. Now, a lot of them are gone to Florida, those darn guys, but this is the remnant that remains. Okay? And then we have a tradition of welcoming our visitors. So if you are a visitor here, not a member, please stand so we can see who you are. We're delighted to have so many visitors. And now I would like each of you to stand and greet someone that you don't know. So you members visiting, greet a visitor, and you in our nation's history, and some of us just needed to celebrate it together. Lynn has just asked me, if you have an empty seat next to you, would you raise your hand? Because there are some people who need to be seated. Keep your hand up. So, are they out there, Lynn?
Judy.
Okay, thank you. And
Let me see the hands one more time so I know
over
when
here.
people come in. So we have about 3 seats, right?
Okay, I want to make a couple more introductions. I want to introduce Hervy Hodges, known to many of you because he's a wonderful actor and vocalist, has been seen around this county very often. Everybody knows Hervy because we see him on stage, but then when we go, hey Hervy, how you doing? He goes, so he's meeting a lot of people today. And I also want to introduce Jerry Friedberg, who is our musician, and thank you, Jerry, for today and every day providing so much wonderful music. That's all the welcoming I can do. We have a moment here for announcements. Is there anyone who has an announcement relative to this fellowship? Wow. Oh, who knew there'd be one?
I want to say that it's wonderful to see all of you here, but those of you who missed yesterday, really missed a very, very moving and wonderful experience.
Thank you,
I'll explain what it was.
Yesterday, Cynthia Johnson organized a program that I think came out of the Library of Congress. I saw Cynthia here somewhere. where people were invited to come and speak on tape for 5 minutes about how they feel about this moment in history, and these things are being collected and then going to the Library of Congress.
As is this morning's service.
As is this morning's service, which brings me to why this man is here. This is Laddie Chapman from the local public access station. He is obviously taping what we're doing here this morning. Steve Kastner taped what we did yesterday. All of this is going to be on public television, the public access television available to anybody who has cable in this county. And we will also have a DVD available of it, I believe, and it will go to the Library of Congress as a part of this effort to record people's feelings about what is happening.
And it'll be on doorbell.net.
Doorbell.net tonight, available
Sounds like
tonight.
it's up there.
Okay, any other announcements? Then let us see if we have any joys or concerns that we would like to share with each other. Anyone? I'll go first. You can go second. I've spent so much time in the last few weeks preparing this message and thinking about what is going on in our country, and I just want to celebrate another joy that I have. When I was a young woman, I lived in San Francisco, and I was very aware of San Francisco politics, and there were 3 fairly young women on the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco those days, this was in the 70s, who were working very hard to deal with the old boy political network that was in San Francisco. Those 3 women were Dianne Feinstein, Barbara Boxer, and Nancy Pelosi. And I have just a particular joy in witnessing where they have come, how much they have done, and how much they are doing for all of us today. And so as a woman, I celebrate them, and that's my joy.
I just want to say that our daughter and son-in-law live in Flagstaff, Arizona, and they have our 6-year-old grandson. And this fall they decided that he needed some kind of religious, spiritual education. So I suggested, why don't you try the Unitarian Fellowship? So she did, and she absolutely loves it. And now her friends have also gone there with her. But this morning she called, and they weren't going to go to the fellowship this morning because they're planning a party for the Cardinals this afternoon. And Jack went running into their bedroom and said, "Mama, get out of bed. We're going to have to go to church today because we are talking about the new president." So even for a 6-year-old, this is a momentous occasion.
I agree. It has infected people from everywhere. I talked to my daughter yesterday who lives in San Francisco, and she goes to a Vedanta religious fellowship, and she does yoga, and she winds up in a lot of Taoist and Buddhist places, and of course there are Cambodian restaurants and Thai restaurants and all that. And she said, "Mom, the most amazing thing is that all of these places always have little altars. You know, they have little incense, and they have little candles, and they have pictures of their particular prophets or gods. And this week, they all have pictures of Barack. They are all, it's astonishing to me.
I don't know if anyone has, yesterday Juliana Newman fell on the way to the program, sat through it with her ankle swelling about that big. And does anyone know what happened to her? Garrett?
She went to the doctor. She went to the hospital this morning to have it looked at and to see what the results are of her accident on the way to my car yesterday. You got insurance?
Yuda?
Going back to joys, and one of our joys is our segue to religious education. And we had a wonderful group 2 weeks ago, and we did a little talk about Martin Luther King, and I left them with, write me a sentence about what your dream is. So we're just going to do a little bit of that right now. Anya, do you want to start yours?
Sure. I have a dream that people who are different can respect each other and see each other as...
Turn around.
Okay. I have a dream that people who are different can respect each other and see each other as each other's equals.
Thank you, Anya.
And we have 3 new members here, and I'm not sure how, if they're going to speak by themselves, if not, but they did write something. First is Grace, and she has a little thing here. Would you like to read it? No, I'll read it. Grace, why don't you stand up with me so I make sure I read it correctly, okay? I have a dream that one day we'll meet Mark Obama, and I will ask him what kind of things do you help the country with. And also I will tell him that you are lucky to be the president. The end. And Evan wrote something also, and he's going to stand up. I did not expect to do the reading today, but that's okay. They'll correct me. My dream speech. I have a dream that someday when I grow up, I will be in the Major League Baseball Association player for the Chicago Cubs. Sorry for all you Milwaukee Brewers. If I don't get in the Major League Baseball Association, then my other dream is either to play in the Basketball Association with the Chicago Bulls, or to be a coach for the little kids in baseball when I grow up. And that is my dream for when I grow up. And Olivia, you want to try? Can we read together? Sure, okay.
I have a dream that there will be world peace and no war at all. Too many wars in the world. Why can't there be peace between countries? No more dead people and more life.
Thank you for sharing that with us today. Anyone else with a joy or concern that you'd like to share? I want us to take all the time we need this morning. I want to savor this moment. And if we go a little bit over an hour, I don't want anybody going, all right, John, it's time. So in the Unitarian Fellowship, we begin by lighting the chalice, which stands as the light of our hopes, and I think I can say prayers, in this community. And so as I light the chalice, Cindy is going to sing our words of consecration and opening. Go ahead. Don't wait for me. Thank you, Cindy. As you can see, the members of this fellowship are very talented, and they offer their talents in many ways. I'd like you all to stand and read with us the statement of purpose. It's printed in your bulletin.
we gather
together to seek knowledge and wisdom, to explore freely the vast reaches of mind and spirit, to celebrate within the caring community those truths, ancient and modern, which give meaning and direction to our lives.
Are there any other people, Lynn, who need to be seated, who have come late?
Two people out in the lobby.
Okay, just raise your hands again if you have a seat, so they don't have to just listen. And Jerry, you want to go ahead with our offertory? Thank you. On November 4th last, Barack Obama stood in Grant Park and challenged the nation with these words: "This victory alone is not the change we seek. It is only the chance for us to make that change. And that cannot happen if we go back to the way things were." I think it's important for us this morning to begin by remembering how things were, and to name some of the people who had enough courage, enough boldness, enough audacity of hope to fight for their civil rights. So I'm going to invite Hervy to share with me a litany of some of those names to help us remember.
Frederick Douglass,
Thomas Paine,
Susan B. Anthony,
Cesar Chavez,
Harriet Tubman,
Abraham Lincoln,
Thurgood Marshall,
Malcolm X,
Fannie Lou Hamer,
Medgar Evers,
Elizabeth Cady Stanton,
Jesse Jackson.
and Rosa Parks.
I trust each one of those names bring memories. These people and millions of others, some known and mostly unknown, have worked for change. They have worked and prayed and hoped and waited and suffered. And sometimes they sang.
been running ever since. It's been a long road coming, but I know a change is gonna come. It's too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. I go to the movies and I go downtown, but somebody's always saying, boy, don't hang around. But it's been a long, long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Listen. Then I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me please. Oh, but he winds up knocking me down, knocking me down on my knees. Oh, there's been times when I thought that I couldn't go on alone, but now I know I'm able to carry on. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know a change has come. Oh.
Just last month, the writer Lisa Earl McLeod wrote an essay about what's going to take place on Tuesday when the United States of America inaugurates its first African-American president. There will be parties, she says. There will be cheering. There will be speeches. And I suspect that a lot of people will cry. Busloads of people, millions of them, are making the trek to Washington, D.C. to witness this historic event. Millions of others will be glued to their television sets on Tuesday morning to see the events. The donors, big and small, will feel proud. The media will chatter about what a big day it is, and all the volunteers who made phone calls and sent emails and registered voters and knocked on doors will be elated because they will think that it was their hard work that made this idea, an idea that once seemed improbable, become real. But there are some other people who also contributed to this moment, and we're not going to see any of them at the inaugural balls. We won't see them marching in the parade. They don't have seats at the swearing-in ceremony, and they will not be interviewed on television. However, I suspect that they will be there, right next to the Obamas as they walk up the steps into the White House. This is a strong, silent group of contributors. And I hope that they realize that without them, this moment could not have come true. They didn't vote for him, they didn't raise money, and they didn't post any videos on YouTube. But they'll be right there at the First Family's side nonetheless, because they are the unsung heroes whose literal blood
and sweat and tears built the very house that the Obamas will be living in. In a grand, full circle moment, America's first black president will walk up steps that were built by slaves. I like to imagine what it would be like if we could go back in time and talk to those slaves and tell them how things have worked out. Imagine walking up to the oldest one, maybe the one who's the most tired looking, kneeling at the bottom of the steps, pushing a rock up to build them. And as he struggles, imagine bending over his ear and whispering to him, one day, on this very spot, a black man with a beautiful wife and 2 beautiful daughters will stand in this spot, and they won't be wearing laborers' rags. They'll be wearing beautiful clothing. They will pause right here on this spot, and as they look up at the doors that they are about to enter, they will send you and every other worker a silent prayer of thanks and gratitude. That old slave might have thought that you were crazy to spin such a tale. But perhaps somewhere, somehow, he knows. I hope they all do. We're going to stand and sing another one of those beautiful songs as part of this movement. We shall overcome. Maybe 30, 40 years ago? I mean, anybody? Who knew? I'm going to sit and give us a full moment of silence to gather ourselves, to be present to this place and to this message, to be grateful for the many blessings that we have received and those to come. So on Tuesday, we inaugurate Obama. But on Monday, we celebrate the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr. What a wonderful collision of dates that is. I'm sure that, like Isaac Newton, Obama would say that if he has gone further, it's because he stands on the shoulders of giants. And no giant looms larger this day than Martin Luther King Jr. It was August 1963 when he stood before a crowd of 250,000 people who had marched on Washington, the very first civil rights gathering that was ever broadcast on live television. All those people had marched on Washington to show their passion for freedom and for justice. And Dr. King, leader, teacher, orator, visionary, stood at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and asked America to live up to its ideals. 100 years earlier, Abraham Lincoln had stood before Congress in that same city of Washington and said, "The struggle of today is not altogether for today, but for a vast future as well." Like Lincoln, Martin led the struggle of his day. Because in 1963, the promises that America had made to its black citizens remained largely unfulfilled. Martin named that failure, but he shared his audacious hope that change would come. And today seems the exact right moment to hear those words again.
Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared by the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of captivity. But 100 years later, we must face the tragic fact that the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in a vast ocean of vast material prosperity. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our great republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, all men, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has been given to the Negro people a bad check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we have come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. But there is something I must say to my people who stand at the warm threshold that leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking of the bitter cup of hatred. We must forever conduct ourselves in a struggle on a high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy that has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to distrust all white people. For many of our white brothers, as is evident by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny, that their freedoms are inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make a pledge that we shall march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those that are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, tired with travel, cannot find lodging in the motels of the highway and the hotels of the city. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York has nothing in which to vote for. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. So I say to you today, my friends, that in spite of the difficulties and frustrations of the moment, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this country will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day down in Mississippi, a desert state sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be one day transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream that one day down in Georgia, with its governors whose lips are currently presently dripping with the words of nullification and interposition, will one day be a place where little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls and walk together as sisters and brothers. I have a dream that every hill shall be made low, every mountain made low, the rough places made plain, the crooked places made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh will be able to see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I return to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to sing together, to work together, to pray together, to struggle for freedom together. With this faith, we will be able to sing together with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become so. So let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the Cretaceous peaks of California. And not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill, every molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when we let it ring, when we let freedom ring, when we let it ring from every hamlet, from every village, from every city, from every state, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to stand together and join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Was anyone there? You were there?
Yeah.
We've all been there on TV, but thanks for bringing it back, Hervy. Nancy Gibbs wrote in Time magazine that some princes are born in palaces. Some princes are born in mangers. But a few are born in the imagination, out of the bits and scraps of history and hope. And you know, Barack Obama never talks about how people see him. I'm not the one making history, he says. You are. Yet as he looked out at that crowd on election night in Grant Park, a park named for a Civil War general, he must have seen the truth. He had to see it on people's faces. We are the ones we have been waiting for, he likes to say. But people were waiting for him, waiting for someone to finish what a king began. This last part of my message is from an essay that Anna Quinlan wrote for Newsweek magazine. I have never read and could not possibly write anything more eloquent or appropriate than Anna has written. So I give you her words from my heart. History will record that on November 4th, 2008, Barack Hussein Obama was elected the first black president of the United States. It is impossible to overstate what that means to this nation. America is as much a concept as it is a country, but it is a concept that has been honored more often in the breach than in the reality. The Statue of Liberty welcomes with those words, "Give me your tired, your poor." Yet generation after generation of immigrants have arrived on our shores to face contempt and hatred, until the passage of time and the flattening of accents have turned them into tolerated natives. The Declaration of Independence states unequivocally that all men are created equal. But the political and the powerful for too long seemed to take the gender of that noun literally and denied all manner of rights to women. But no injustice or prejudice brought to bear by this country against its own people can compare to the way it has treated its black men and women. Humiliation, degradation, lynchings, murders. The rights that the United States pretended to confer upon all of its citizens were unthinkingly and consistently denied them. The right to vote, the right to representation, the right to protection under the justice system. Henry Louis Gates Jr., who wrote a memoir entitled Color People, said, "For most of my childhood, we couldn't eat in restaurants, we couldn't sleep in hotels, we couldn't go into most of the rooms marked bathroom, and we could not try on clothes in stores." Alice Walker left home for college on a bus, but she was ordered to move after a white woman complained that she was too close to the front. None of this was so very long ago. But time passed. People worked. Things changed. And Henry Louis Gates is now a professor at Harvard. And Alice Walker is a revered writer. And John Lewis, a boy who loved books, but who was not permitted to go into the public library. A man whose skull was fractured by a state paratrooper in Alabama when he walked in a peaceful march, now sits in Congress as a representative from the state of Georgia. As President-elect Obama said when he gave that beautiful speech about race last year, when he was speaking of systemic poverty and bad schools and broken families, he said this. He said, "Many of the disparities that exist in the African American community today can be directly traced to the inequalities passed on from an earlier generation. that suffered under the brutal legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. But Obama said something else in that speech, something simpler and more profound, something that now that his improbable candidacy has prevailed is even more glorious. He made the political spiritual. He said, in the end, what is called for is nothing more and nothing less than what all of the world's great religions have demanded, that we do unto others as we would have done unto ourselves. He asked the American people to be fair and just, to be kind and generous, to put prejudice behind them, and to be one people. And not because it's a legal or a social imperative, but because it is a moral one. There will be learned discussions in the years to come about the specific meaning of this moment, about whether it will be more symbolic or substantive, about whether having a black president will lull white America into thinking that racism is a thing of the past. But just for a moment, consider this small fact. For a long time, a black man was denied the title Mr. In many parts of the white community. He was only called by his first name, like a child, no matter how old or esteemed he might be. But now, a black man will be called Mr. President. They never thought they would see the day. A lot of people said, especially the older ones, those who remember the murders of Medgar Evers, and Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King. They wept, and so did I. Perhaps it's because this young man seems so young and so vigorous in a nation that seems so old and so tired. Perhaps it's because he promises hope and change, and both are so badly needed. This is a president for our children's generation, a more tolerant and diverse generation, so insensible of the bright dividing lines that they belie a time that there was a crayon in my box of Crayolas marked flesh. And the color of that crayon was pale pink. But I suspect that, like many others, I wept for myself, too, because I felt that my country was finally living up to its ideals. Despite all of our prejudices, seen and unseen, millions of citizens managed, in the words of Dr. King, to judge Barack Obama on the content of his character and not on the color of his skin. I have some closing words from me. Nothing further will happen without us. This did not all end on Election Day. This will not all end on Inauguration Day. This is merely the end of the beginning. Again and again, Obama talks about the importance of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And I leave you with something from Abraham Lincoln, something he said in 1861 as he faced the struggles of his own time. He said, "The dogmas of the quiet past are insufficient to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. Because our case is new, we must think anew and act anew." We're going to sing our prelude, postlude song with a hope and a prayer.
Nations
fellowship after some coffee to come back and talk to the speakers. Anything on your minds and hearts will be here, so enjoy some coffee. In 15 minutes, the bells will ring, and we'll see you. Thank you.